Hey there, welcome back to Farmcraft. I'm John. We're still working on my truck, making some good progress. And in this video, I'm gonna tackle the worst rust area on the truck, and that is the rocker panel and cab corner on this side. We looked at this previously. This thing's rusted out all the way to the front. So there's a significant amount of body work that I need to do here. We did body work over on the other side previously. I've got some new tools and a couple ideas to do things a little better. Let's get started. First thing I'm gonna do is take the step off and then also get this rear door out of the way. I may need to take the front door off too, but if I do, I'm gonna have to put the tires on and move it from the lift because I can't open that door enough to actually get that door off as it is. So close. Doesn't that look nice? This push rod here is right in the way of getting an impact on that. Well, it's no trouble. I might as well do some rust converter on this. Slap some paint on it. This thing's going to be apart for a while. All right, so I'm trying to be a little smarter so that I can put the cab corner in the same place. So I've taken some measurements from the inside of this corner here to the frame. I measured, and I also measured from that to the brake rotor, the shortest distance. And then finally I measured from the center of this door seam right there to the brake rotor. And I got very precise measurements on those. All right, it's not perfect, but will definitely help me when I'm putting this cab corner back on because it really helps me see where it should lie. I see no problem here. Wow. All right, so I've been sitting here scratching my head for a while, figuring out how I want to do this. This one feels quite a bit more intimidating than the other side because so much of this needs to be replaced. I feel I'm going to lose my geometry. I can't just go ripping all this out because then I'm not going to be able to get it back into the right spot. Let me show you what I have to work with. Obviously, I've got the cab corner, I've got the rocker panel, and I've got the center rocker panel piece that's for structure. I am glad to see it has some drainage allowance in it, so we'll definitely make use of that. The piece we were just looking at is this piece here. What's left of it. This interior piece here also has drainage allowance. There was another one in here somewhere. Like, there's one, and then there's one. So here's the deal. The front of the exterior rocker panel is not bad. This actually looks good. The left front fender bolts onto it, so I'd have to take that off, which maybe that's not that hard, I don't know. But I'm thinking, the more I look at this, why replace it if you don't need it? If you can see the inside of the exterior rocker panel, it actually looks perfect. There's no rust on it. It's the middle panel there is a disaster. The front of this is good. The middle panel and the rocker, the exterior rocker panel and the interior is all good, at least to that drain hole. There's a tiny patch of rust there. I'm gonna rust convert and paint all of this stuff up here. Obviously the rot starts right there. So what I'm thinking is replace the rocker panel to this point. So I'll be cutting off my new one. The one, if I did the entire thing, first of all, I'd have to take this panel off. And I'm not just doing that, I'm not doing that just because I'm lazy. Not saying I'm not lazy, but that's not the reason. If I take that panel up into here, then I'm welding through all these curves and I'm going to be doing Bondo through all those curves. I think that's going to be a lot more difficult than just a straight shot down like that. This part up here will be under trim and everything. You'll see very little of it. This is nice and flat and straight, and then this is under the truck. Again, nobody's going to be looking at that. So that seems like the easiest place for me as far as doing the body work. And that also will allow me to expose the entire thing, the middle rocker panel that I'm worried about. How is I going to replace that? Well, if I can take this entire thing off from here back, then that's going to make that much easier. So that's the plan. Now, where do I start? I think what I need to do, I don't want to just start cutting everything because then I'm going to lose my geometry. I need to know where this line is. Obviously, I've got it there, but the whole back, all of that is going away. I am going to work my way back, replacing the inner portion. I'm not going to worry about the middle or the exterior. I'm just going to get the inner portion replaced and maintain this line here. So once I have that all done, then I can go exterior and remove the rocker panel, remove the interior panel, the middle panel, and start working on that. But I'll have my geometry because I'll have a brand new 16 gauge piece of steel going down here. Now the other thing is here, drainage. I need drainage holes, and I'm not sure, do I just drill holes and do that? Or do I need to come up with a way to have some sort of drainage like that? I don't know the answer yet. See, look at how, this is gonna be challenging because there's like a curve in this. This is further that way than this is. You can kind of see the curve up there. And this piece here rolls up through and ties in with the body. That's what the exterior panel is actually connected to. Let me start cutting out the definite rot. Yeah, I'm getting paralysis by analysis. Let's just start cutting. All right, so it turns out more analysis was necessary. They made this even more fun for me because that is at an angle. It's not square to the truck. I need to know where to cut so that I have an easier time replacing things. So I've got an angle gauge here. Let's zero it to the frame. There, that's 0. That's about 8 degrees, 7.8, 7.4, 6.9, 7. That's fun. Got a new tool, Harbor Freight Special. Well, that's not cutting as well as I was hoping, but I'm in a really awkward position up against this frame. Trying to keep track of where these drains are. Hey Dozer, come here. So I've mentioned in previous videos how skinny Dozer is. You want that ball? We don't starve him. We give him all that he wants to eat. He's just finicky and doesn't like to eat that much. We even took him to a vet, had him checked out to make sure there was no problem, and they said everything was fine. So that brings me to the sponsor of today's video, The Farmer's Dog. They make fresh food for dogs from whole meats and vegetables, cooked and then frozen so it can be shipped directly to you. Or in this case, shipped directly to Dozer here. They gather information on your dog, the breed, current weight, ideal weight, and send food packs personalized to exactly what your dog needs. The food is human grade, meaning it's held to the same quality and safety standards as our food, and you can definitely tell when you see and smell it. The chicken recipe smells like chicken. The turkey smells like turkey, and the beef like beef. And he definitely loves it. When it's dinner time, he's excited and gets right to work on eating, something he didn't used to do before. This is a great example of you get what you pay for. This is real healthy food to feed a hardworking dog, and we love our four-legged friends enough that for us, it's worth it. He's been eating The Farmer's Dog for about a month now, and to me, he's already filled out some and probably even added some muscle. I think he looks great. So if you want to start feeding your dog real food, right now you can get 50% off your first box of freshly made, healthy dog food by using my link. Plus you can get free shipping and 24/7 customer support. The whole process is easy, fast, and convenient. Even Dozer here thinks you ought to give it a try. Don't you, buddy? Let's get back to work. Good boy, Dozer. So I kind of had a eureka moment while I was working on this. I want to maintain my geometry. I need something along this bottom that's going to be straight and strong and keep everything in position, because I'm going to be welding a bunch of pieces together, and the welds want to pull, and then we're going to be going on the other side. I just want something that's going to stay there. So it occurred to me that if I put something thicker along the bottom, you won't see it from the outside, and it actually will make my bridging between these points that I've cut off and here a little easier, because it's not as far a difference in depth. It just so happens I have a bunch of this stuff, which is 3/4 by 1/4. That's like perfect. It's straight. It's going to add a lot of rigidity to that bottom section. It's going to allow me to interrupt it and leave a piece of it out will make a drainage section. So it's going to make drainage, which I didn't know how I was going to do. Pretty easy, actually. This took me a long time to come up with. It's probably obvious after the fact, but I'm kind of curious, what would a pro body guy do? Anyone watching, what would you do in a situation like this to keep your geometry right?
So here's the idea. I welded the top part solid. The bottom I just spot welded. That way if any water works between the pieces of metal, gravity will help pull it out. So it's going to go on something like that. And I measured and left the gaps exactly where the drainage holes are on the middle plate. So those are going to line up. And that will take the place of the drainage holes that were on the inner plate, which I can still show you over here. That takes the place of these. See how that was bent out? So that gives me some structure there. It's going to be pretty straight and pretty rigid. None of this is going to be visible once everything's together. Yeah, I'm feeling good about this. This is going to be nice and strong, and this is going to help me preserve my geometry. So I don't know if it's coming across on camera, but this is sitting at an angle, and I was worried that I had bent this and that was incorrect. But I have a scrap of the rocker panel from the other side, and when I put it on, it matches that angle perfectly. So I need to maintain that angle. So here's a straight edge. Here you can see that angle. What is it? Well, I can measure from a butt weld to the top of my, what am I going to call that? Bottom band? We'll call it the bottom band. So that's just about 3 inches. So I need 3 inches of straight before the bend. And how much does it bend? So there, I've got that angle gauge set to 0. About 17 degrees. So let me bend one up like that and see how close I am. Yeah, it looks pretty good. 17 degrees. Okay, it definitely needs more angle and less length. I'll cut that off in a minute. It's still at 0. Yeah, it looks like I have to overbend by 3 degrees to end up, because see, I'm not putting any pressure on it now, and I'm right at 20. I'll go cut that off and we'll see you back out there. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I could have just a touch more angle. We'll say 21 on the angle. Blackjack. Alright, yeah, you can see it doesn't match up there, and that's because that is curving out. My goal right now is just to kind of get this thing covered up and tack everything in place. I do want to put some holes in this like they had, so I'll probably put something right in the center of that. And I need to drill probably 3 places on the bottom to plug weld. All right, now we have to do that for about 6 more hours. Wow, I'm happy with that. I can go all the way down that. Just with pieces like that, I'll make them a little longer now. And we're gonna roll on. I'm gonna make a bunch more of those. I'm not gonna show you because it's the exact same thing you've already seen.
Now this piece was pretty tough because it's curving right there, and I made a big long piece, and I don't think I'm going to do many more long ones if there's a curve, but it's close enough. Finding holes.
The edges of this piece didn't match up quite right, so I'm having more difficulty welding it and learning a lesson that we'll talk about later.
I can come right down those because I'm using 16 gauge. It's not a tin foil that I'm trying to weld. Stuff that's on here is pretty thin.
Well, it's a little ugly. I learned something there. A butt weld, when they're matched up well, is a lot easier than when they're slightly offset. I mean, that's kind of obvious to say, but so I'm gonna have to take more care and make sure my butt welds are lined up well. Anyway, let's keep trucking. Yeah, I'm not really worried about how it looks, but that's much more paintable. It had so many little pocks and holes and everything in it. That'll be a lot easier to protect like that.
When the plates are butted together correctly, it goes a lot easier.
Okay, here we are so far. Still have a lot to do in the front section. So let me go ahead and get this straight section here filled in, and then we're just going to have the little patches, like there's a curve right there. So I'll have to do a little piece there. I need a piece here. I'll have to do some pieces around this thing, and then this back piece.
I discovered why bodywork professionals always have a hammer nearby. A lot easier to line up your butt welds.
This one took a lot of back and forth, tweaking this and tweaking that. There's a bend here, a bend here, but it fits pretty well. That'll do. I tacked this piece on. The bottom band wanted to come a little too close to the frame, so I clamped it to the existing rocker panel so it's in the right place, tacked that on, and now it's staying put. So now I can do all my body work and that'll stay where it's supposed to be. Alright, so this thing's looking kind of steampunk, which I think is cool, but man, it is time consuming. But we're almost there. One more piece. I'd kind of like to see a truck on the outside done this way. The entire truck, just plates of steel all tack loaded together like this. So that is a big hurdle out of the way. We have the interior plate all welded up and replaced, and drainage holes are ready to go. Yeah, everything stayed nice and straight. The angle is good. Man, that was a lot of work. It does look kind of cool though, doesn't it? Before I paint it though, I am gonna rip the rocker panel off and the middle rocker panel so that I can get to the other side of this. There may be some areas that I want to touch up welding from the other side, and I'm gonna do that first, and then I will prime and paint both sides of this interior panel. And then we'll move on to the middle rocker panel, which since it's sitting right here and already shaped correctly, hopefully that's going to go a little faster. That was a lot of work.
See the problem, my front fender gets in the way of that. I want to be able to hold this up there and trace it very precisely, and that's where I'm going to cut the old rocker panel off. I want to cut it somewhere around there, but the first thing I want to do is be able to hold this up there so that I can line that up. It's actually hard to get a good tracing because it's trying to open up the rocker panel. It won't go all the way on, of course, because the other one's in the way. But I've got it lined well enough that I know where not to cut past. So I'm going to get the bulk of it out and get the bottom off, and then I think I should be able to put it on and get a much more accurate tracing. The nice thing is I don't have to drill out any of these spot welds on the bottom because I can just cut it all off. All the spot welds on the top I am going to have to drill out. Yay. Now I should mention that I know the pros will take an air saw, put the piece on, and cut the two right beside each other so that they automatically match. But I don't have confidence that I'm going to be able to do that and do it well. This saw wanders a lot. It doesn't seem to cut that well. I think I have cheap blades. I don't think the saw is the problem. But anyway, I just don't feel comfortable trying that, and I don't want to screw it up. So obviously, if I was a pro and I was going to be doing this all the time, I'd have to figure that out. But since I'm just doing a few things here, I don't really need to.
Yeah, see how nice that is? And we are having a little winter event. If it wasn't for these tarps and this cover, I certainly wouldn't be making any headway on this job. That needs fixed. A little overzealous on that one. Alright, I just have this piece left. And then I want to get the rocker panel cut. That's going to give me maximum exposure to know what I'm doing with this middle panel. I haven't decided yet if I want to bring it all the way up here or not. Probably, because it's pre-made, as long as it matches well. But with this thing in the middle, it kind of makes it tough. Not sure what I'm going to do there.
Whoa. Shoot, I am so close right there. I got lucky that I didn't cut too far. Look how far off that line is. And that's just because the bottom was being held out when I traced it before. It was like that. Once the bottom goes in, wow, it really drops down. Don't be an idiot. So the idea was, now that I have the bottom off, I can trace it more precisely. But I actually cut a little bit too far here. Just leave yourself more room than I did. I left myself about 1/4 inch, 6 millimeters. Definitely leave more than that. I was having trouble marking that before, and I think it's because it's so smooth. So I'm going to get that mark off of there. I'm going to sand it a little bit and then mark it again with this thing in the exact position it's going to end up in. Now onto the middle rocker panel.
All right, so I can tell you the new piece looks to be an exact match. The holes are in the same place. The seam appears to be in the same place. Like, see this hole here is that hole up in there. That hole. But the panel actually goes up behind this, and obviously I'm not replacing up there. So I am going to have to cut this down. The other thing is, I don't know what you call this, but there's this piece of metal here that kind of supports the rocker panel between the doors. And I don't see any way to take that off. I think it's probably spot welded up behind. It's in good shape. There's a little rust on the bottom. I'll scrape that or wire brush that off and then rust treat it. And this, there is an opening underneath. So I can slide this up under it. I'm gonna have to, it's gonna be difficult to remove this middle panel in here. And it's gonna be ugly. It doesn't have to be, I just wanna get something there. But see, I wanna get this all the way up to that seam, but remove what I can of that, remove all of that. And I need to take a little more cab corner off so that I can kind of get part way through that circle. So yeah, this is going to be a challenge. I want to rust treat everything on this back panel on the inside and get that primed and painted. But it's way too cold today to do that, so we're going to have to wait on that. I'm just going to keep working on this, getting this thing fitted, but I'm not going to install it until I have warm enough temperatures where I can do something with that rust back there. But I need to get this out of the way anyway, so we will keep plugging along. It'd be nice to delete that, but I'm sure that's there for a reason. I imagine that gives that kind of big wide area of the rocker panel more support. Whereas out here, it's kind of in a bend. Here, it only has the one side bent, so you could easily dent it. So I'm gonna work around it. I wonder what the pros would do. I hope a professional body guy will watch my video and tell me what I did wrong, what I could have done better. There's definitely something to be said for a small wheel and also for a weak grinder. You know, this is a cordless grinder and I can stall it. When it catches something, it doesn't rip itself out of my hands. It's a lot more safe to use, even without the guard. Yeah, I don't know about that, but. So for this next camera angle, I am trying to cut the middle rocker panel out from behind this support here. I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but I'm going to be reaching up inside that. Oh, am I? I was going to be reaching up inside that with a Dremel. I don't think I am. Let's see if I have a different way to do that. The thing is, the whole bottom of this is real rusty anyway, so I'm just going to cut it off. Piece was right there. And this piece is right. It's such a huge help that the holes are in the exact same, because that's allowing me to orient these things after I've cut everything off.
All right, it's still pretty cold. It's probably 40 out here right now, but it'll get colder tonight in just a few hours. So in order to start putting rust treatment and primer and stuff on, I've got to do it when it's warmer. And I'm going to use this infrared heater to help me. But what that means is I'm going to go ahead and do this now, prep it, and then rust convert this side and have the heater on it while I'm working more over there on that. All right, that converts all the iron oxide rust into iron phosphate. This is the OSPHO stuff that you get at Ace Hardware. I'll leave a link if you're interested. It's actually quite cheap. It's like 30 bucks for a whole gallon of it. Finally. Looks better already. And we'll just keep it at a reasonable temperature for the next couple hours. Well, I'm going to try this thing again. It hasn't been doing what I was hoping, that's for sure. That last inch it cut really well, so it's probably user error. Well, that's long because it's being held that way, because these aren't lining up. So that's, shoot, that's a 1/4 inch. I feel like I have quite a bit of up and down flexibility here because, you know, where it lands on this, it's not visible. It doesn't, none of this is visible. It doesn't really matter. I think what I need to do is get this right so that it'll shift over, and then I can really look at everything better. That's definite progress. Look at that. There's no rust on that truck. Now, obviously, before I do any welding of fixing that, I'm going to be painting behind it, but it's actually getting dark right now, and I've got some other stuff I need to work on, so we're gonna let this sit like this until tomorrow. I'm hoping for some warmer temperatures so that I can prime and paint without having to deal with a heater. All right, it is 20 degrees out here, and but I've got this heater. I've had this heater on this metal for a while. So it's actually, it's probably like 80. Challenging doing everything in the winter, but we're gonna put some primer on this thing. Then I need to decide if I wanna put paint on it, because the paint says you have to keep it above 50 for like 24 hours, and that's not gonna happen. This does provide corrosion protection, and I'm going to fluid film in here when I'm done, so I might just do this. I warmed this up too. This is like 70 degrees. All right, this primer sets up in 10 minutes. It says it's ready to top coat. It's probably been sitting here for almost an hour, and it's nice and warm. It should be. I mean, it feels dry. I'm going with it. We're gonna go do the other side now. All right, I'm gonna let that sit there. I actually have to run into town, so I'll probably be back in a couple hours.
Getting close.
Okay, many back and forths later, here we are, and it's fitting pretty well. Certainly something I can weld. The new part was not as tall as the old one when I originally put it up here, so I'm just drilling the spot welds a little high, and I've already got them marked out on the top there. I still need to mark all the ones on the bottom. Have to avoid the drains. I think there's a drain right there. I'm pretty happy with it. So we're gonna weld this up, and I guess what I'm gonna do is just weld all my seams first. Don't have to be perfect, but it's just gonna be a bunch of tacks, and then I will come back and do all the spot welds. Now just the spot welds, and that's done. Obviously I can't reach up inside there and weld that. I don't have small sticks for stick welding. I guess it's possible to weld that, not for me, but it's fine. I'll have to grind that back to flush, but we're looking good. So much of getting a decent weld is getting in a stable, comfortable position. That first one, I'm trying to hold the pliers and do this, and I didn't have a good, but when I could put my hand there and stabilize everything, it just goes so much better. And if you watch pro welders, you'll see they have all sorts of tricks they'll use to give themselves some stabilization, especially when they're doing a long bead. Middle rocker panel is in. Yeah, looks a little better when you get all the junk off the weld. That's not going anywhere. All right, I'm gonna have to do some adjusting. The whole thing needs to come up a little bit, and I can do that. Like here, it's actually not bad, but here, I'm gonna have to cut away some. The important joint, this one, it's pretty good, but it doesn't seem like it's an exact match. I'm a little bit low right there, but I'm flush on the bottom. And if I unclamp, I can kind of bend it and I'll tack it and try to get it all to line up as I'm putting it together. But you can see here, I'm not matching up exact there, and I'm high here, but that's easy enough. Once I get it where I want it, I can just grind that down to flush. Yeah, like that matches up really well right there. I'm gonna bring it up so that gap will close up. This is interfering, preventing it from coming up, and so is that. But you can see this doesn't match up. There's a little step right there. The good news is this is all behind the doors. Very little of this is going to be visible. You'll see this bottom section here that doesn't have any joints on it, which will look fine. So I just need to get this right so that it runs and the door will close properly, and then get the cab corner on right so that I don't have issues like I had on the last one. So I'm going to take my time and fiddle with this thing, taking it off, putting it back on, and adjusting little bits here and there with a grinder. It's not going to be anything exciting to see. And then I will bring you back. All right, it has been a lot of back and forth, but I've got this thing pretty well matching up now. Everywhere. I am going to have to do a little bit of bending as I weld this. Like, it's good here, but then it needs to start coming out the further out I get. So I'm actually going to be probably reaching back behind it with a screwdriver and just working my way along, tacking to get that nice and flat. And then this here, I'll pull out. I think it's going to match up pretty well, actually. I went ahead and drilled for plug welds. Now this one isn't sticking up very much, so it's fine. This one here is actually sticking up quite a bit above where the old one was. So I'm going to mark that and just go ahead and cut it off. All right, you can see I've got it perfectly flush right there, but it's dipping down here. So I'm going to weld this, and then I'm going to push it up and bend it to match as I go all the way down, just doing tacks and trying to get that panel as perfect as I can, especially out here on the face. What'd I forget? Yeah, I gotta weld prep all the edges. Let me take it back off. Come together nice. Under here, there's a pretty sizable step there. If I pry it, I can get them flush. I am good right there, so I think I'm just going to go ahead and weld that. That whole outer face is actually quite good. That could come out a little bit. Tappy tap tap. That works remarkably well. It's actually really good to there. Might push that in just a hair, but so I'm reaching back behind because I've got a pretty good lip there. If I could carefully run that reciprocating saw right along that. Leave a little gap, but that's easy to weld. This upper piece is just down right behind that, and it won't let it pop in. And I don't want to beat it to death. Well, for that saw actually worked pretty well. So now I've just got a tiny little gap. Weld will easily fill that. In fact, I think it makes a better weld when you give it a place to live instead of just doing straight butt welding. But this metal's so thin, it still goes all the way through. They're both fine. All right, I'm to my stupid gap because I cut too much. It's not too bad, but welding across that's going to be a pain. I think it'll be easier if I can just bend up a little backer plate. All right, now the cab corner. So I checked my measurements from earlier. I measured from here to the frame and from here to the edge of this rotor, and I'm right on the money. I might be a 32nd off in this dimension. I mean, that's obviously close enough. So I need to fit the cab corner now. Have to make a decision and go with it. I'm gonna cut it like that so that I'm not doing body filler in these areas. Just go right down the center and avoid this. And then I'm gonna trace it on there, and I'm gonna carefully cut it. I'm gonna butt weld the whole thing. Remember last one I overlapped and regretted that. I'll butt weld it, and I'm gonna leave this bottom not plug welded yet so that I have some flexibility while I'm welding it to this. And then once I get everything welded up, I'll clamp it tight and plug weld. Actually, I forgot a step there. I'm gonna get this tacked on. I'm gonna put the door back on, and we're gonna check it. And then we're gonna weld it up. Here's where I kind of messed up before. What caused me to cut too much here is when you're putting the piece on and everything is still in the way, you can't really get it on. Like, I can't get this in position to mark it correctly because it's getting stretched over here, which is pushing that out. And because it's not flush here, I can't get this seam to line up there. And obviously it would be nice if I could have it perfectly in position and mark exactly where it needs to be. So what I'm gonna do, I can cut that off and get that out of the way so that at least that will go in. This bottom, I can kind of line up with the bottom there. And basically I'm just gonna kind of take it slow and get this as close as I can so that the last thing I do is very precisely mark that line and get that right, this and this up here, because those are the important ones. Ow. All right, that lets me get much closer, but I'm still spreading here. This is just tough. I think this is like where it becomes an art. Someone who's experienced can just see where to cut. I am not that person. So this is the mistake I made in the last one, is not paying attention to the position of that. So that's what I need to figure out now. So I'm getting close, but I really got to commit here now because it's overlapping on the bottom here, which I can't point to and hold it at the same time. It's overlapping right there. That's holding it down, and I need it to go up. I've measured. It's not the perfect measurement, but I think it's good enough. From the center of this bend here back to the brake rotor, it measures exactly what it did on the old one before I took it off. So, and I've got it clamped, so I can go ahead and mark that down here, I think pretty confidently. And You know, looking at it, I just don't think I have any choice. I'm just gonna get this in position as best I can, and I'm gonna mark the whole thing and cut it off. I don't really see what else I can do here. I can fiddle with it forever and never make any progress. I think you just have to kind of go with it. Yeah, I'm gonna mark it, I'm gonna cut it, and then I'm probably going to be disappointed. So I have a feeling there's a million tricks that the body guys know, and I don't know them. I'm trying to figure this out. But one thing that worked really well is giving myself some extra room by cutting right along the seam. So it needs to come up more. And you can see I've got a gap there, I don't there, I don't there. If I just run the saw right along that seam, it's going to give me the width of the blade for it to come up. And that width is fine. You can weld across that. So this isn't going to mess you up as long as you can just stay on the seam, which it did pretty well last time. Yeah, so that could come up just a hair more. I'll do it again. And the wide areas keep getting narrower because of this. All right, I'm gonna fiddle with this for a little while, taking it off, doing exactly what you're seeing me do here, and I'll bring you back once I get it fitted.
So here we are after fitting, I think, well enough. It's gonna require some bending as I weld it up. I'm gonna start here and I'm gonna work my way down and then work my way around to get everything as flush as I can. My measurements look good. I also put this template on there and it actually looks quite good too. Pretty much right on the money. So let's do some weld prep and start tacking. All right, I've got it as close as I can get it.
So from this view, you can really see how the curves don't match up. It's flush at the top, but in the middle, the cab corner is sticking to the right compared to the other body panels. So I'm going to be bending and fiddling with it to get those to line up as I weld. So here I'm using a pry bar, pulling the rocker panel out to make it match the cab corner. And now this middle section has good alignment without any prying. And now I'm clamping the cab corner back in to make the curve continue to match as I go down. It's interesting how things move around. So I did get this seam to line up. Real happy with that. But somehow it opened up this one. I mean, I guess that makes a little bit of sense. It doesn't matter, it's on the bottom, and I can weld that shut. It's just surprising how wide, because that was not apart when I was fitting it. But these weren't lining up, so now that they are lined up, it pushed it out and made that gap. The rest of it, I think, is going to be just fine. I can move that and get it where it needs to be. So now it's time to check the door. Just make sure I'm not causing a problem. It's interesting because it does look like it's narrowing down. That'll change a little bit as I weld it around. But I've got a good more than 1/8 of an inch clearance even now without the backside welded. Wow. I was so careful and somehow it's still It's still different than it was, about 1/8 of an inch. It's not quite 1/8, it's probably 2 millimeters. But that's fine. Man, it is hard to do this stuff perfect, I can tell you that. The door doesn't hit, there's plenty of clearance. It's only going to get better as I weld the rest of it. So I'm calling it good. That's not going anywhere. Now we'll come up on the back and plug weld that cap corner in place. So do you like it more with the shield or without? I can't hear you. Well, if you're not going to answer, you're getting the shield. Well, the welding is done, and I haven't set my truck on fire once. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not sticking up anywhere on my joint so that when I go over with Bondo, it'll be flat. I found the flap disc you have to be careful with on the grinder. It goes quick.
Yeah, it's definitely not sticking up anywhere except maybe in that very far corner, but I don't care about that. It's underneath the truck.
All right, body filler time. I'm mixing this up outside. I'm also wearing a respirator. If you read the warnings on body filler, they're pretty dire. And it's probably not as bad as they make it sound because lawyers, but I'm still not taking any chances. So I'm just wearing a respirator the whole time I'm working with it. So spreading it on, you only have a few minutes. I have to do 2 batches to get all the filler on here. And somebody came to check my work. So for sanding, obviously the dust is also a hazard, so still wearing a respirator. And you probably notice I have a couple low spots in the center of that. I have to come back later and do some more body filler. You'll see that coming up. And after that sets up, I go to 180 grit. There's not a lot of body filler left to sand, so I can keep going up on the grit. All right, I have everything sanded to 180. It all feels good, but obviously there's probably going to be more imperfections there that I'm going to have to work on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use filler primer. This is not regular primer. It goes on much thicker. You have to sand it or it's not going to look right. You can't just spray it on and then top coat it. So I'm going to use this on all the areas where there's potential defects. I also sanded the panels just to give the primer something to stick to, but I'll use regular primer on that. There's no reason to have to sand again on those. All right, let's do some priming. Actually, let's wipe it down with mineral spirits first. I want to get the dust off. There, Once that dries, I'll bring you back and we'll do some priming. I'm using regular primer in these areas. I don't usually paint like this. I do the start and stop, but every time I would start and stop with this old can, it would spatter. So this was the way I could get the best application. It's good enough. Well, I got fooled before. I'm thinking it looks pretty darn good, but I'm going to take my time. We'll try to get this as... I'm not going to try to get it perfect, but I'm going to try to get it better than I did the last time. All right, after the primer has dried, it's funny, you can see it. Can't really feel it. So I am going to wet sand this with 400 grit and then try to get an assessment of how things look. Now most of this stuff up here gets covered. You can just see like the outer inch. So you'll be able to see a little bit of that. I need to work on that. But all the stuff up in there doesn't matter. Yeah, that one looks better. But this fooled me before with this flat primer on here. It looks, there's a little defect there. It looks better. Yeah, I've got to do something with that. But then when you actually put paint on it, it looks worse again. Yeah, I can still see a little bit there. Get the light just right. So I'm going to put more high fill on that after it dries. And we'll keep doing that until I'm happy. That should do the trick. So I've already taken a lot more care than I did on the other side, and I think it would already look better, but there's still some minor imperfections in there, even after sanding. So I'm gonna filler primer these areas again. One more coat of this, and I hope we'll be there. I guess we'll see. And by one coat, I mean 2 to 3 light coats, but I'm going to give this another real kind of light sanding, just trying to minimize little tiny defects like that. Again, this stuff's behind the door. The area you're going to see actually looks really good. Cap corner looks good. So we'll sand it up, and then we're going to try to paint this thing. I think we're there. I think we're good enough for this old truck. Or you might even say good enough for who it's for. All right, I've got a couple areas that I want to prime, and remember my primer wasn't spraying right. I took this off last night. I soaked it in mineral spirits and blew it out several times. I'm hoping it'll work right now. Let's see. It's better. Still a little spattery. Yeah, that's better. And I should mention, I've really become a fan of these cans that give you, how many different options is that? 5? So if one of them clogs, you just pick a different one. I've never had one of these not work on me, even after it's been sitting for a while. So this is not the high fill primer. A couple areas I got down to bare metal. So I just want something on them. Look at that. Am I gonna have to sand that again? Because it's spattering so much. This is the only can of primer I have that is just regular primer. If I had a different can on something like this, I would use it. All right, it is the moment of truth. I did do a wet sanding on this and then had to let that dry for a while. But this is actual paint. No more sanding, right? Did you see that? I bumped the support arm of the lift and immediately got a run. It really surprised me how quickly this happened and how visible that run was going to be. Be careful when you're spraying. I try wiping it off before it dries, but that's going to be very visible. So then I try a rag with mineral spirits.
Oh, good grief. I'm going to have to sand that off. Don't hit that.
I then tried some acetone, which did work much better. Definitely thinned out the edges, but it was still going to be visible. I probably should just roll on, but I am going to wet sand that and try to smooth that out. This up here I'm really happy with. That looks really good. Really, yeah, I don't even really see anything on that. It looks good around the curve too. Where you do start to see it is going to be under the door gasket and even underneath. Yeah, I'm real happy with that joint. This one actually looks really good too. The only defects I see right there, it's amazing how the paint makes them stand out. And there's a couple little tiny pock marks in there, but I just don't really care. And then right here on the edge of the cab corner, I may hit that with a little sandpaper because that's even above my weld. I'm not, the weld was under here, went up like that. So yeah, that's just the edge of the body filler. I bet you I can sand that out. I'm happy with this. I think it looks pretty darn good. But that run really annoys me. So I don't know, that's pretty smooth now. All right, there was 3 spots with defects right there. The one you've already seen. This one I wet sanded. There was just an obvious lip right there. And then this here. And I figured I'd give it a try. It really didn't take that long. I wet sanded it, I air blew it off, and then I wiped it down, and it's warm and dry out here. It dries off really quick. So I'm gonna go ahead and put primer filler on it, let it sit, give it a wet sand, and then we're gonna roll on and see if that made any difference. If it did, this probably only took me maybe 45 minutes to do these 3 spots. Just kind of experimenting. Good to know if it works. That looks a lot better. That looks better. Yeah, that actually fixed up nicely. It really wasn't that bad. I think the key here is just having the patience to do it. You get to this point of the job, you want to be done because you've been at it for a long time. Yeah, that's probably the big difference between the good shops and the not so good, or in some cases, is having the patience to do the final details. I'm really happy with this. I think this looks great. It needs 2 more coats of paint, and the temperature's about to start dropping, so I'm gonna wait till tomorrow to do that. 2 more coats of paint, 3 coats of clear coat, and this job is done. Before I put the final coats of paint on the outside, I did go ahead and paint underneath. I didn't want any overspray getting on the paint that really matters. So here goes the second coat, being very careful not to bump the lift arms and cause another run. All right, third coat. Clear coat. Well, I just ran out. I only had enough to do two coats of clear. I think is plenty. In fact, it's perfect. All right, final product. And remember, all that's going to be covered up by the bed, so out here where it matters, looks pretty good. Even under the door looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. And obviously I did a better job than I needed to do on this old truck. The reason for that is because I wanted the challenge. I wanted to see if I could do it. And now that I know I can, although it's a heck of a test of patience, I don't know if I'll be doing it in the future. But if I ever want to do actual body work on a nicer vehicle, it's something that I could potentially tackle, because I know given enough patience, I can make it look right. Look how, how perfect that is compared to what it was. That'll work. Remember how lovely this looked before? All right, so the first time in a long time, geez, maybe even almost a month, I can close the truck because the doors have been off and I didn't really have any way to close it up. And that's good because we have a rainstorm coming and it's pretty windy actually. So this whole thing is going to get wet, I'm sure. Well, there you go, guys. That job is done. Thank goodness. That was a really big job. Everything just takes much longer than you think it's going to take. It's like, well, I'm basically replacing 3 pieces of metal. the interior panel, the middle panel, and the outer panel, and then the cab corner. I mean, how long can that take? Well, if you're trying to make it perfect, it can take an awful long time. So my key takeaways on this second time doing body work, what I learned is take your time and make sure you have good butt welds everywhere. Don't weld it if it's not a good butt weld. If it's a little overlapped, if it's a little off, you need to pry it, you need to hammer it, you need to something to make it into a butt weld. It's going to go a lot easier for you. That way when it gets time to doing the body filler, everything's going to smooth out a lot better for you and a lot easier for you. And then that's the other thing is once you get to the body filler step, man, I'm just itching to be done, but you have to have the patience to say, okay, I'm going to paint this thing, I'm going to see defects, we're going to sand again, we're going to do more filler primer, we might even do more body filler. Just accept it. If you want it perfect, that's the way it's going to be. I mean, unless you're a pro, maybe they can get it perfect first try. They probably can. But it is possible. Even after you've painted it, if you see a defect, get out the sandpaper, get out the body filler, fix it up, and you can make it perfect. So for me, I kind of like things to move along a little faster. This was a test of my patience for sure. But it's done. That truck essentially has no rust on it at this point. I have a little bit more I'm going to do to this, but not much. Obviously, I need to deal with the bed. We'll talk about that in the next video. There's a lot of things that I could do, a lot of different ways that I could manage this. But I've got a plan. We'll talk about that next video. This video is over. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.